The air inside the restaurant was thick with the scent of sizzling steak and aged wine. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in a golden glow, reflecting off polished marble floors. Laughter and murmured conversations filled the space, as well-dressed patrons sipped on $100 cocktails, their designer watches catching the light with every movement. Then, the door swung open. A man walked in, alone, quiet, unassuming. His clothes were simple, a faded button-down shirt, worn jeans, and a pair of scuffed shoes that had clearly seen better days. He carried no flashy accessories, no designer labels, just an effortless calm, as if he belonged anywhere he went. But to Emily, the waitress stationed at the front, he didn't belong here. She sized him up instantly. He wasn't like the usual guests who waltzed in with arrogance and gold-plated credit cards. He looked more like someone who had wandered in by mistake. Trying to hide her smirk, she approached him. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, her tone polite but indifferent. The man gave her a small, warm smile. His voice, deep and rich, carried an effortless charm. "Just a table for one, please." Emily hesitated for only a second before nodding. She grabbed a menu, already knowing exactly where she would seat him. Somewhere in the back, away from the important guests. As she led him across the restaurant, she glanced at her coworker, Jessica, who was taking an order nearby. When their eyes met, Emily raised an eyebrow and smirked slightly. Jessica stifled a laugh. Neither of them had any idea who they were dealing with. And soon, Emily would regret ever laughing at him. Emily placed the menu down on a small table near the back of the restaurant, far from the grand windows overlooking the city skyline, far from the VIPs and celebrities who usually dined here. This was where they sat guests who didn't quite fit the restaurant's image. "Your server will be with you shortly," she said, forcing a polite smile before turning on her heel and walking away. As she passed the hostess stand, she felt Jessica nudge her arm. "You really sat him back there?" Jessica whispered, stealing a glance at the man as he calmly unfolded his napkin. Emily shrugged, smirking. "Come on, look at him. No watch, no designer suit, no attitude. He probably doesn't even realize what this place charges for a steak." Jessica giggled. "He's gonna have a heart attack when he sees the menu." They both chuckled as Emily grabbed a tray of drinks for another table. She had worked here long enough to spot the ones who pretended to belong. He was probably one of them. Maybe he had saved up just to impress a date that never showed. Or maybe he was here just for the experience. One expensive drink before slipping out. Embarrassed. Meanwhile, at the back table, Morgan Freeman sat with quiet ease. His deep-set eyes flicked over the menu, scanning each item slowly, thoughtfully. His posture was relaxed, his breathing steady. A waiter approached, standing a little taller as he noticed the simplicity of the man's clothes. "Good evening, sir. What can I get started for you?" Morgan looked up, his expression warm yet unreadable. "I'll have the filet mignon, the truffle mashed potatoes, and your finest red wine." The waiter blinked. He hesitated just slightly, as if wondering whether the man really knew how much that glass of wine cost. Emily, watching from across the room, nearly laughed out loud. "Oh, this is gonna be good," she nudged Jessica. "Did he just order the finest red?" Jessica stifled a laugh. "No way he can afford that." Emily folded her arms, a knowing smirk creeping onto her lips. This guy has no idea what's coming. But what she didn't know was that she was the one about to be shocked. As Morgan Freeman sat in quiet comfort, sipping water from a crystal glass. The restaurant around him buzzed with energy. Plates clattered, laughter echoed, and silverware scraped against fine china. The rich and powerful dined without a care, indulging in meals that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Emily continued stealing glances at the man in the back. She was waiting for it, that moment when his eyes would widen at the check, when he'd fumble through his wallet, realizing he'd made a terrible mistake. It was always entertaining to watch. But something strange was happening. A couple seated near the bar had turned to look at him. Then another. A young man at the far end of the restaurant squinted, as if trying to place a familiar face. Soon whispers spread like ripples in still water. Emily furrowed her brows. Why were people looking at him? Then as she turned to grab a tray, a voice cut through the noise. "Wait a second. Is that Morgan Freeman?" The words sent a jolt through her. Emily's heart skipped a beat as her mind raced. No, it couldn't be. Not him. There was no way. But as she turned back toward the man in the back table, really looking at him this time, her stomach twisted. The deep-set eyes, the effortless calm, the voice. Oh no. At that exact moment, the restaurant manager walked by, only to stop in his tracks, his face drained of color. "That's," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "That's Morgan Freeman." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her hands, steady just moments ago, felt suddenly clammy. She had just led one of the most legendary actors of all time to the worst seat in the restaurant. She had smirked at him, judged him, laughed at him. And worst of all, he had noticed everything. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears as she watched the scene unfold. The murmurs in the restaurant grew louder. People were sneaking glances, some whispering excitedly, others subtly pulling out their phones. But Morgan Freeman? He remained perfectly calm, unbothered, as if he was completely used to this kind of reaction. The waiter approached his table, carefully placing the leather bill folder in front of him. Emily felt a twisted sense of anticipation. This was it. The moment he'd finally realized the mistake he'd made. The moment she'd been waiting for. But Morgan didn't even blink. With the same effortless ease, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek, jet-black credit card. Emily's breath caught. Not just any black card. The black card. The kind reserved for the ultra-wealthy. The kind with no limit. The kind that could pay for everything in the restaurant 10 times over. The waiter, now fully aware of who he was serving, handled the card with the utmost care, nodding respectfully. "Right away, sir." Emily's face burned. She felt her stomach drop as she exchanged panicked glances with Jessica, who now looked just as stunned as she felt. This isn't happening," Jessica whispered. Emily swallowed hard, unable to speak. A minute later, the waiter returned with the receipt. Morgan signed his name with slow, deliberate strokes, and then, without a moment's hesitation, he added something extra. A tip. An insane tip. Emily's eyes widened. The number on that receipt was more than she made in a month, maybe even 2. She felt her knees go weak. Morgan finally stood, adjusting his shirt casually. And then, just before leaving, he turned toward Emily. Their eyes met. That warm, knowing expression. That voice, deep, smooth, unforgettable. Never judge a book by its cover. Emily felt her breath hitch. She had no words. Morgan tipped his head slightly, then strode toward the exit, moving with the same quiet confidence he had walked in with. The restaurant was silent now, all eyes following him as he left. As the door closed behind him, Emily stood frozen, her heart still racing. She had laughed at him, mocked him, dismissed him. And now? Now she knew she would never, ever make that mistake again.